FalloutEquestria Heroes by No One. Chapter 27. Deceit.
I am a pony, more sinned against than sinning. You're joking, right?
It was odd for me to say those words, because Mr. House never joked. And he certainly wouldn't bring me, Flair, and Serenity up to his irradiated office just to tell a horrible joke. So he must have called us up to tell a horrible truth. When he had said a few days earlier he had a job he wanted me to do when I was healed, I was hoping it would involve sticking a spike through Dragonslayer's heart. The plan, for lack of an appropriate term, was for me to somehow infiltrate the Clip and Clops casino, home to Granny Dynamite, the Galatians, and about 15,000 Ponytrons. Sneak into their basement and look for a computer that remotely controlled the Ponytrons. Apparently the documents from Walkirk's office I delivered to Mr. House indicated there was an extra electrical room in the basement. This one connected directly to the local power grid, and considered the hotel had been Walkirk's base of operations before the war, it seemed to indicate some kind of network control. It seemed like a stretch to me, but Mr. House was convinced that the Ponytrons had to be remotely controlled from somewhere. And up to that point, nobody had any clue where.
For once I agree with P-Brain,
Flair said, standing closer to the door than the rest of us for fear Mr. House would notice we'd let an Enclave officer into a private meeting. The ghoul snapped his eyes towards the blue Pegasus, his glowing eyes narrowing.
You are here, Pegasus. Not because I like or trust you, but so I can tell you this directly. If any of this information is leaked to the Enclave, you won't survive the night. Your opinions are of no concern.
Mr. House turned back to address me.
There is more, of course, and you needn't use the front door to access the room. Walkirk created tunnels, and it was nothing if not paranoid, so he created a back door connected to the tunnel system.
That made a certain amount of sense, as it seemed every one of the major hotels had some sort of emergency exit. It seemed odd to me how prepared the city was for the apocalypse. Not that it had helped in the end.
What if the door is locked, or blocked, or can only be opened from the inside?
I thought of the secret tunnel entrance mayhem it showed me a while ago.
That
He looked back over at Flair.
is why I'm letting you take him.
no door can withstand my might.
Flair said in a self-amused tone. I had to admit the existence of a back door did make it more likely there was something important in that room, but that didn't mean he was right about what that thing was. It was probably just a secret room like the one under the moon, and Mr. House, like every pony else, needed something to cling to.
If there is a computer, how will that help?
It wasn't as if I knew how to hack. The best I could do was kick it, or hope Serenity was able to do something with it. Even though Serenity managed to wriggle her way into coming with me to the briefing, if only so she could see Platinum Haze afterward, but she was far too sick to come along. Besides, with the tunnels awash as they were, I would have insisted she stay in Thiese anyway. Mr. House walked back to his computer and started to type something.
If I'm right,
That was a pretty big if.
then the computer would have to transmit and receive information wirelessly. Assuming it's a model of computer that is similar to the popular models before the war,
There we go again with the assuming.
I should be able to upload a program onto your pip-book. That you can transfer onto the computer so I can control it remotely.
And when it's not,
Flair started to snark, but was swiftly cut off.
If it's not,
Mr. House dug into a drawer and removed a crown. Actually, I think it was technically a tiara, with a black opal inlaid into it.
this is a recollector. It's incredibly valuable, virtually priceless. It will allow you record any memory so as long as the device is on and active. I want you to wear this once you enter the room, and look very closely at everything inside. If the program doesn't work, I want to know as much about it as possible.
At least it was pretty. Though after Platinum Haze's memory spell fuck-up, I was nervous about using that thing.
Why don't you just send Wishing Star?
If I remembered correctly, the impossibly advanced cyborg had like camera eyes. And he could disguise himself, so he would have far better suited for this mission than I would.
He is away on a mission,
Mr. House said in an almost bitter tone.
Most of the Hazai are. Only you, Starscream, and Tatlet Security Detail are available, and the others I need.
He beckoned me with a hoof to his computer terminal, so I did what was asked. Serenity was lying down on my back, but I think she'd fallen asleep a while ago.
Hoof.
I lifted up my metal leg.
Other hoof.
Oh, right, my pip-bug. He plugged a wire into my pip-bug and connected it to his massive computer, but kept talking.
Do you know they blame me?
I didn't even get to ask who before he answered.
The people. Somehow they found out I'm a ghoul, and they think I wanted this.
The radiation, because ghouls healed from it.
They're in the tunnels blaming me for what happened, accusing me of kicking out civilians to die while I hauled right away from my Hazai and bask in the radiation. They think I wanted this?
He looked up at the window towards the raptor still looming high over the city.
I can't save everyone. I kept as many inside as possible, but I couldn't bring the entire city into my walls. So they blame me, and they're going to come for me. The longer the wait, the more the discontent in the tunnels grow. And eventually, they will come for me. Tatlip will do what she can, but I do not have as many guards as I would like. And if the sea rises up to tear me down, it won't be enough.
He closed his eyes as my pip-bug beeped that it was finished downloading the program.
Who do you think did this then? Blow the megaspell, that is.
I knew it was Dragonslayer, but what I didn't know was who he was working for. I assumed it was the Steel Rangers, or at least the Steel Rangers controlled by Blackwater. That horrible bitch. But I wasn't sure, and maybe Mr. House knew something. He looked over at me.
Do I really need to answer?
He pointed a hoof towards the raptor hanging over the city like a black cloud.
Who had the most to gain from this chaos? And then that thing shows up on the same day. I don't believe in coincidence.
Flair coughed politely into his armored hoof.
The Enclave doesn't have the resources to manufacture regular megaspells, never mind fuse them with ponies.
No pony asked your opinion, chicken.
Mr. House said with a sneer directed at Flair.
Since you asked my opinion, I think it was the Minotaurs.
I almost laughed. The Minotaur King was at the train station when the bomb went off.
Who's to say the guy they sent as their king was anybody at all? Maybe he was just a good liar who'd die for the cause, and when the cause was wiping out the entirety of the NCA top brass and security personnel from every major gang, then it was for a surprise.
If I hadn't traveled with the Minotaur King to the base in the tunnels, I might have agreed with Flair.
And still you continue.
Mr. House hoofed over the crown-like device to me.
Be careful with this. If it gets broken, I'm taking it out of your pay.
I was going to have to thank Flair later for putting my boss in a bad mood.
I don't know why you put up with that Enclave bastard.
He's not so bad,
I replied as I carefully put the expensive device into my saddlebag.
if you can get past the talking, and he saved my life a few times.
My memory went back into the time he took his Gatling laser to the back to save me, and it burned so bad it melted part of his armor to slag. A crowning moment to my stupidity. Mr. House lowered his voice to barely a whisper.
Whatever your reasons, watch him. I don't trust him, and neither should you.
But I did trust Flair. Which was weird to think about because he hadn't always honored that trust. But when it came right down to it, I knew he'd risk his life for me or Serenity, and that's what really mattered. So long as that didn't change, I would always trust Flair. Idiot that he was. I heard mumbling on my back right as we left House's office.
Is it over?
Serenity asked before smacking her lips and giving a tiny yawn.
Yes, sweetie,
I said as I continued to walk towards the elevator.
And you missed it,
Flair said with false enthusiasm that was slightly undermined by the almost robotic-like voice his mask made him sound like.
then we got the awesomest mission ever. Shame you fell asleep.
But
Serenity said, and I couldn't have been more proud of her.
what really happened? Where are we going next? You're going nowhere.
We entered the small elevator and I quickly punched in the button to take us to Platinum Haze's floor.
Except to hang out with either Platinum Haze or Pearly.
I hadn't really asked, but I was sure one of them would be willing to watch Serenity for a bit. Though I was more hoping Pearly would agree because of the radiation issues.
But Ma... No but, Mams. You are still sick and you need to get better before I will even think about taking you on another dangerous adventure.
Hopefully I would never have to take her with me ever again, but even with my limited pattern recognition that I knew that wasn't likely.
It's going to be boring anyway,
Flair said in an attempt to back me up.
just computer stuff.
It was a poor attempt.
But I love computer stuff.
Serenity tugged on the back of my mane.
Mommy, you need to let me come now. How are you going to be able to do computery stuff, and what if I need to save your life again? I'll be fine, honey.
Well, as fine as I ever was.
Flair will be there too, and he's saved my life plenty of times too, and the computer stuff is simple.
Probably.
But what if I need to save his life too?
Serenity said as she walked out of the elevator towards the room.
Then I guess we'll all die a horrible death as we cry out our stupidity for not bringing you along. It'll be sad and tragic, and you'll be secure in how right and awesome you are.
Flair said, his voice echoing from the mask.
You're still not coming with us.
Aww, but
She let out a series of coughs that almost knocked her off.
I'm not too
Cough.
sick. Sweetie?
I stopped in the middle of the hall and listened carefully to the ticking of my pip-buck. The radiation levels outside of safe zones hadn't gone down at all since last time.
Here, drink this.
I took out a Radaway and before I could turn to hoof it to her, I felt Serenity's magic take it away and start chugging.
You're probably too sick to be up here at all. I'm worried about you, which is why you can't go. You can't save any pony if you're puking your guts out.
Serenity finished the Radaway, make an ick sound, and put the empty potion into my pack before replying,
Yeah, alright. Just this once. Just this once.
I promised, opening the door to my old room. The inside was just as I left it, including the blue alicorn lying across the couch, floating a book in front of her. Platinum Haze's ears twitched as she turned and smiled at us.
Ah, we were not expecting you back so soon.
She carefully bookmarked her page and set the book down on the coffee table.
We regret to inform you we are still slightly bleeding radiation, and it would be dangerous for us to spend any excessive time in close contact with the Haze!
Serenity, not one for listening to warnings, charges forward and wrapped her forelegs around the alicorn's neck.
Hi!
Hi. Platinum Haze stretched out a wing and wrapped it around the filly, hugging her close.
Well, we are glad to be seeing you again. We must repeat our previous statement about it being dangerous to have prolonged contact with us, due to our body's affinity with magical radiation. It's fine,
Serenity said with the type of confidence only a child could have.
I just had some of that icky Radaway, and I got much sicker the other day after saving Mama's life. But I had to do it, you know how she is, always getting shot and stuff. Most ponies would be dead by now, but they're not as tough as Mama.
There were few enough ponies who were quite as tough as me, so I guess that was good.
Yeah, I'm a tough one,
I said, stepping into the room as well.
And Serenity, that's enough hugging for now. You don't want to be sick for any longer than you have to.
Serenity gave Haze's neck another squeeze, but did reluctantly let go and walk back over to the other side of the room.
Stupid radiation,
she muttered under her breath.
We are sorry, young Serenity,
Platinum Haze said as she got up from the couch to stand at her full impressive height across the room from us.
But we heard you were very brave.
Serenity's face lit back up at the talk about how brave she was, and she nodded enthusiastically.
Yep, I saved Mama's life and scared away the big buck when it tried to kill her. Silly things were weak to loud noises. I think it hurt him.
Huh. I hadn't actually thought about the spells that Serenity used. It must have been some sort of modification of her sound dispelling spell.
Oh!
Serenity spun around quickly, showing off her cutie mark.
Look, look!
Platinum Haze smiled softly.
It is quite lovely, to be sure. What do you imagine it means, Serenity? It means I'm good with cybernetics and have a big heart, I think. Yeah, totally. Because I'm awesome. I'm going to make cybernetics when I'm older. Mr. House said he's going to train me and stuff.
Serenity said with a huge smile.
Isn't it awesome? Yes. We believe it is indeed something worthy of considerable praise. We have met many ponies, but we cannot recall meeting any pony with that particular special talent. Truly, you are unique and special.
Serenity seemed to accept this compliment, judging by her huge smile.
Hey!
Serenity squinted her eyes at the alicorn.
How come you don't have a cutie mark anyway? You're like way old. We are somewhere roughly between 60 and 80 years old.
Wait, what? There was no way she looked that old.
Though we cannot be completely certain, as, while it is true Mother only began increasing the demand for alicorns within the last 10 to 20 years, she had been perfecting the creation of our sisters for much longer. And after studying what memories we have that we believe to be our own rather than a byproduct of Unity, comparing them with more recent post-Unity memories in regards to structures we have seen, and contrasting the relative age, that is the most accurate judgment we can make of our age. There's no way to properly confirm our suspicions, but given our altered state, age is no longer of much importance to us.
She seemed a bit perplexed at her own answer for a few seconds before realizing we were still staring at her.
We are sorry. What was the question?
Serenity gave her a slight giggle before answering.
I asked why you don't have a cutie mark. Oh, yes, we are unsure.
I prepared myself for another long-winded rant.
We are quite positive we possessed a cutie mark before our introduction to Unity, but our lack of one following the dissolution is a bit concerning. It has come to our attention to none of our sisters seem to retain their cutie marks, except in special circumstances, as some sort of result of Unity. Our belief is that the changes to our body and soul was enough to divorce us from our previous talent, and we must either remember and enact our old special talent or discover a new one. This is, of course, only a theory. Since Mother is no longer with us, the exact nature of the changes are mostly a mystery.
So... Serenity said slowly, content to ignore the explanation.
That makes me more mature than you, right?
Platinum Haze paused to think this over before giving the filly a warm smile.
We suppose it does, but we suspect you were more mature than us anyway.
So...
Flair piped in, reminding me he was still in the room.
What was your cutie mark before, whatever happened to you happened?
Platinum Haze stared at Flair with unblinking yellow eyes for longer than was comfortable, before answering in a shockingly quiet voice.
We do not remember.
The quiet in the room was almost deafening in its intensity, with the only sound being the ticking of my Pip-Bug's radiation detector to break up the silence. Eventually, much to everyone's delight, Platinum Haze spoke up.
Oh, we had meant to inquire as to the nature of your visit. While we are always thankful for your company, we understand the intrinsic danger in visiting us in this state.
That seemed like as good a distraction from the unnerving awkwardness of the previous topic as any.
Well, I wanted to ask if you could watch Serenity if the other pony I was going to ask isn't able. Me and Flair have a job to do, and after everything that's happened, I really don't want to bring her into the tunnels with me.
Platinum Haze nodded slowly.
We suppose we could, but it would be safer to house her with some pony else, given our current state. More radiation in her condition would be dangerous. I know.
I sighed and rubbed my forehead.
It's a dumb thing to ask, and I'm really hoping Pearly can help. It's just I need someone to make sure she is okay and safe. I can't leave her alone with everything going on, and if Pearly can't help, she's the only pony I can really trust. So it'd be either with you or going with me. And there would be radiation either way.
You're the a backup plan.
Flair said.
Because apparently she comes up with those now. Most likely Pearly will just handle the bread.
Serenity stuck her tongue out at Flair for that, and I'm sure he would have returned the favor if not for the mask.
So it was mostly an excuse for Silver to make kissy faces at you.
Fuck off, Flair,
came my obvious response. Platinum Haze gave a slight smirk.
Ah, we see. Well, we cannot disapprove of such a noble goal.
This almost had me blushing almost.
So you have piqued our interest into what exactly your current mission entails.
I quickly and succinctly explained our current mission. Well, I'd attempted to, but Flair kept correcting me on the details and I ended up letting him explain it all. It wasn't that I didn't understand the mission. I'm just not a detail-oriented pony. Platinum Haze just nodded along with our description and waited for us to finish before speaking.
We see. We wish to make an odd request.
There was a lull in her speaking which made me realize she was asking me if she could ask a question. It was odd, but I nodded anyway.
We request we assist you in this task. Given the explanation of the mission at Hoof, it would not violate our non-aggression policies, and we believe our magic may be of some use. In addition, we must admit to being rather bored here alone, and we would very much enjoy being a beneficial partner.
My answer was obvious, but I looked over to Flair to see what he thought.
There's going to be plenty of radiation down there no matter what, so welcome aboard. What?
Serenity said loudly.
No, I have to come with you guys. Come on, it ain't fair. Please, pretty please.
When no pony immediately answered her, she realized her fate was sealed and resorted to pouting.
This sucks.
We arranged to meet Platinum Haze outside the BS, but with the understanding it might just be to escort Serenity back to the room on the off chance Pearly was unable to help. To that extent, the three of us went down to the main floor of the BS to find it still in the same organized chaos as it was before. The makeshift tents and walls reminded me of a similar scene I saw back in Brittle Hope when it was being besieged by the Crimson Hoof, though the BS was a bit more organized. Or rather, it certainly appeared to be, with the smattering of armed guards standing around to control movement through the floor, and the considerably larger amount of guards surrounding the pit in the center of the room where the supplies were being stored.
Now,
I said, my eyes scanning through the mess of tents and ponies.
How to find Pearly?
That part looked like it was going to be more difficult than I'd hoped for, until I remembered I had a secret weapon.
Flair?
Right.
He flapped his wings thrice before taking off into the air. He soared high above the din of the floor and circled around the room. I could see a few ponies stop to watch him nervously, and nearly all of the guards tensed up at the sight. I was starting to think maybe Mr. House didn't foster much trust for Pegasus in his ranks. It took him a few minutes, but eventually he came back down to us with a look of confidence on his face, which I could tell because he took his helmet off once we got down to the radiation-free main room, and told us,
I found her. Right this way. Follow me. No staring at my ass on the way.
He walked away briskly and I had to wonder what he was talking about, because when I looked at his ass, it was just metal plating like the rest of the armor.
Pervert,
Flair said, turning his head slightly to catch me staring, which I wouldn't have been if he hadn't said anything. Serenity snickered at me, though I don't think she really got the joke, and I went and followed the tricky Pegasi anyway. He led us through the crowd of ponies. Luckily most gave him a wide berth, until we found Pearly. She wasn't alone, and it didn't look to be the good sort of not alone either. She was partially cornered by two ponies I didn't recognize. One was a sea green unicorn mare with a light blue mane, and light red unicorn stallion with a yellow mane.
Who else could have taken it?
I could hear the unicorn mare raise her voice as I closed in.
We see you walking by from our tent, the same night it went missing. So?
Pearly asked nearly as loudly.
It don't mean I took your damn food. I don't even know which tent yours is. I'm sure you'll talk when we tell Mr. House.
The mare was cut off by Pearly.
Tell what, pray? That you saw me near your tent and what? You don't think he got more to deal with than paranoid delusions?
Pearly growled.
I ain't got time for this. So unless you're gonna start making sense, y'all can get out of my face!
The mare shoved at Pearly with a hoof.
Listen up, you little bitch. If I catch you near my shit again, I'll have you strung up by your fucking ears.
And for a split second I thought Pearly was going to whip out her shotgun, but she seemed to catch sight of me walking up and stopped.
I'm sure,
I said, making my presence known,
that Mr. House would like to know about this. Accusations like this, they are very serious.
The two unknown ponies turned to look at me, their eyes falling quickly on my cybernetic foreleg.
However, he hates to have his time wasted. Who the hell do you think you are?
The mare asked, her eyes still on my leg.
Hired gun.
The mare scoffed for a second until I finished.
Designation Star Mare of the Thiese.
That caught her haughty voice in her throat for a good few seconds.
Oh, well,
She looked over to the stallion, who did nothing but glower at me.
We wouldn't want to waste his time. Then I guess you have nothing to do here, unless you have evidence.
I raised an eyebrow at her, trying to look inquisitive, but she shook her head.
No, not yet. We'll be back though.
She huffed and turned around, and when the stallion didn't immediately follow, she grabbed his mane with her magic to help him along. The two of them trotted off at a brisk pace away from us.
Yeah, you better run!
Serenity decided it was a good idea to shout at them, and oddly enough, it really did make them start running faster.
Thanks, hon.
I turned back to Pearly when she started talking, her hoof rubbing her forehead in annoyance.
Them too.
She sighed and turned towards a tent that was made by draping a blanket over rows of slot machines, with a second working as a door. She started to lift the blanket as if to invite us in, but turned to look again.
Actually, I'd thought to be polite and invite you folk inside, but I'm afraid there won't be enough room. We got to talk out of here, hon. Sure.
My eyes glanced over to where the two ponies went.
What was that all about? Nothing you want to get all worked up about, I assure you,
she said empathetically.
Well, I'm too to think I went out of my way to get stealing the food. I don't really blame them, to be honest. There's some folks that are riled up because folks like what work at the power plant been getting more food rations, and some have taken to stealing from them to make it fair or some shit. I didn't do it, but I must have wandered by the tent at the wrong time, and since I'm the new go around and no pony trusts me, it falls time.
She sighed.
Not that I am grateful I'm here. Much better than starving in the tunnels.
Mr. House still has the power plant running?
Flair asked, walking up beside me.
You bet your feather he does.
Pearly smirked.
You see these lights?
She pointed up to the lights hanging from the ceiling.
They don't run on friendship, I'll tell you that. Some pony has to go into the radiation to make sure it's running, so they get extra food for their efforts.
I'm sure he's exchanging extra to the other gangs,
Flair said with some confidence.
It's me, hon. No pony really keeps me up to date with his policies.
She looked between the three of us.
But something's giving me the feeling they're smart with this visits and food crises and power politics. What can I help you with, hon? I was hoping for a favor,
I said.
Well, ain't nothing I wouldn't do for my favorite overly chaste mare.
My cheeks flushed slightly.
And you did get me into here right before everything went bad, so I owe you pretty big. The thing is, Flair and I have something of an important job to do, and, well, Serenity is still recovering from radiation sickness. We don't want her to risk coming with us. Not another word.
Pearly raised a hoof.
You need me to watch the little tyke to make sure nothing happens to her, is that right, hon? Yeah, basically that. The mission isn't supposed to be dangerous,
I admitted.
But, knowing my luck... Knowing your luck, you'll be missing another body part by the time it's over.
Her eyes fell on my new robotic hind leg.
Like that one right there? I'm gonna guess there's a story behind that. Yeah!
Serenity perked up.
There were scorpions and they saved Mama's life.
Pearly's gaze softened when she looked at the small filly.
Oh, I'm sure you did, sweetie.
Pearlie moved her hoof to brush aside the blankets that acted as a door to her tent. "Why don't you come inside and tell me all about it?" Serenity nodded but turned to me first. The little filly stared up at me with her big grey eyes, and it wasn't until she whined, "Mom!" that I sought to lean down. She wrapped her hoofs around my neck as soon as it was in range, and I carefully put my foreleg around her shoulders. "If you lose another body part, or like die or something, then I'll never ever forgive you, okay?" "Okay," I answered softly, releasing her embrace. "You be safe too, and make sure to listen to Pearlie." As much as you listen to any pony anyway. "I promise I'll be back as soon as possible, and you'll be able to come with me next time, and I love you." Serenity loosened her hold on my neck. "Love you too, Mama," she said as she let go completely and turned to walk into Pearlie's little shack thing. She stopped halfway in to turn around at me and narrowed her eyes. "Never ever forgive you," she repeated one last time before vanishing. Pearlie rested a hoof on my shoulder. "Nothing'll happen to her. I'd risk my life to keep the little darling safe." "I know." My eyes were still on the entrance to the tent. "I just worry." "Good," Pearlie said, leaning over to plant a quick kiss on my cheek. "You're supposed to worry, and I think you of all ponies could stand to worry a little more about the consequences of your actions." I really couldn't argue with that. While it was true I probably spent too much time looking back at my failures, I seemed to fail consistently with seeing the results of my actions before I perform them. "So just be quick and come back safe." With that, Pearlie too vanished inside her makeshift tent, leaving me and Flair alone. With no more pressing matters, the two of us made our way through the throngs of ponies in the casino towards the exit, which was still heavily guarded under Tight-Lip's watchful eye. The mare smiled and waved at us when she saw us walking towards her. "Hey!" she yelled over. "Heard you two were coming. I'll open the door lickety-split. Don't want to keep Mr. House's mission waiting." I said, walking over to the always excitable head of security. "Thanks. I see that little darling filly of yours isn't with you. I hope she feels better soon." The mare gave me an overlarge smile. "I'd hate for anything to happen to her. She's such a sweet filly. Probably best she's left behind so, what with all the radiation," Tight-Lip said in her usual chatty manner as she moved to unlock the door. "And of course, it's safer inside here. Much safer." The doors cracked open enough to let the harsh sun from outside shine through the cracks. My pip buck started ticking immediately, though it was a slow, steady tick. Without another word, Flair and I stepped once more outside, ready to face the radiation once more.
New day, same radiation blasted hello, but hey, it's home!
The voice of New Haggis boomed from my pip buck as Flair, Platinum Haze and I made our way to a tunnel entrance. It had been a while since I'd listened to the radio, and it was about time I checked in on the news. I knew it would be bad, but I had to know how bad.
Now folks, you know how I hate to be a downer, but I don't have a lot of good news for you this lovely day, so let's try to speed through this quickly so you can listen to soothing tunes. Update on the war front first of all. The NCA has found a series of secret bases in the old train tunnels outside of the city. NCA officials admitted the bases were troublesome with how close they were to the city and how far away they were from Minotaur land, but stressed that they cleared all the bases of Minotaurs and they were confident no further bases remain. Meanwhile, the battle over the West Canyon Bridge is still locked in a stalemate. NCA officials declined to comment on the state of the battle. In sad news, it has been confirmed that a body found in the aftermath of the train station disaster was in fact that of a local hero, Pinprick, aka the hero of Wending. Not much is known about the enigmatic pony, and by all accounts she appeared out of nowhere as a filly by her side just in time to save the town of Wending in the north from destruction. Her heroic deeds seem to spread across the northern villages, culminating in a climatic defense of the trading town of Brittle Hope from raiders, where she saved most of the population by organizing an escape. She soon found her way to Thiese proper, where she teamed up with the local whack job the Bedmare to take down an illegal drug-dealing gang in Paradise Mount. No pony knows for sure what she was doing at the train station, what exactly killed her or where her filly sidekick is, but it can be assumed she was doing her best to stop the tragedy. She was a great pony who gave her life to save others, and she will be sorely missed. The Watchers have stated plans to hold a funeral for the mayor, but gave no more information.
It really stung how little New Haggis seemed to know about Pinprick. The way he was talking made her out to be some goddess-like figure that was too good for this rotten world. And I knew Pinprick would have hated to be sort of like that. Pinprick was a good pony by the end, but she was more than that. She was a flawed and troubled mare who was trying to make up for an unsavory past. She deserved to be remembered for who she was, because knowing where she came from made her sacrifice mean more. And where was the Batmare's eulogy? She did just as much as Pinprick, if not more, and the Batmare's sacrifice actually saved hundreds of lives. But she got nothing. It seemed unfair.
Speaking of the Watchers, they are still giving out free radaway at stations throughout the tunnels. If you have foals, they ask you to bring them with you so they know you're not lying. Cleancut, leader of the Watcher, has stated emphatically that he understands how desperate every pony is, but if you try to push to the front of the line, you will not be given any radaway. So please, every pony, be patient. You'll get your radaway so long as you just stay calm.
The radio pony coughed sharply into the microphone for a second before cutting his sound away. A few seconds later, he was back.
Sorry about that, every pony. Well, that's your news for this hour. Time for some music to take your mind away.
Platinum Haze looked over at me when music I didn't recognize started to play through my pip-bug.
If we are not mistaken, this Pinprick was a friend of yours, correct? Once we are done here, we will see if we can ascertain details on the planned funeral.
We made our way east to the central water fountain into the former slums. They were always confusing. A mishmash of broken buildings and hastily repaired shacks all climbing over each other. It almost reminded me of Mareford, at least it had when it was full of ponies. Now that it was empty, it just creeped me out.
No,
I said softly.
She wasn't a friend. Well, she was. It's complicated.
I sighed, my eyes scanning the empty hovels and broken grey streets.
I was there when she died, you know.
I closed my eyes, the memories coming back to me.
She was trying to save my life when Dragonslayer killed her. She said that I saved her. I think she meant like I saved her from herself, because who she was before was unpleasant.
I opened my eyes and looked over to Platinum Haze.
I don't want to go to her funeral. It's not for me. It's for ponies who've heard of her on the radio. Ponies who want a martyr. It's not for ponies who knew her.
Wow, hired.
Flair said from my other side.
That sounded almost deep. Who knew you had it in you? And where did you learn the word martyr? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, just a bit surprising coming from you.
I shoved Flair's side lightly with a hoof.
Fuck off, Flair.
The Pegasus dramatically stumbled into a nearby wall.
We find your relationship odd,
Platinum Haze said as she waited for Flair to get back in line.
If we did not know any better, we would assume that you two did not get along.
We don't,
Flair said, brushing off his armor.
We actually hate each other. I can't stand this insufferable bitch and she's ugly as sin.
Flair is an idiotic pretty stallion who is not nearly as funny as you think he is. It's a blessing from Celestia I haven't crushed his annoying skull beneath a hoof,
was my reply. See. Haze's melodic voice was tinged with confusion.
We are unsure if we are supposed to laugh at this interaction, or if we are to pull you two apart. It is confusing to us.
There's the trick,
Flair said.
Our friendship is based on abusive behavior and mutual hate. It's not that complicated.
Really, though?
I said as we came upon one of the entrances to the tunnels.
You're not as funny as you think you are.
The three of us went into the entrance and down into the abyss. As soon as we came out of the entrance into the tunnels proper, I could feel my shoulder begin to burn. Platinum Haze had turned invisible behind us. I knew it was for the best, but sometimes it was difficult to get used to the burning sensation. It didn't help that most of my hind leg was cybernetic too now. The tunnels had not changed much from when Flair took me through them a few days before, but the ponies in the tunnels seemed to. Maybe it was just my mind comparing them to the healthy ponies in the BS, but the crowds of ponies looked pale and unnaturally skinny. They walked around with their heads hung low as if they were being pushed down by some unseen weight. There were no crazy ponies on saxophones calling for armed insurrections this time, but it really wouldn't have surprised me if there were. We didn't stay in the populated parts of the rundown tunnels for long because our route took us down to the lower levels of the tunnels that were less populated, and because Platinum Haze would have a really difficult time dodging ponies while invisible. After shoving our way past sick-looking ponies that gave us dirty looks, presumably for my cybernetics and Flair's armor, we made our way into an unused side passage that led to a stairwell. On the wall to our right, I saw something newly scribbled on the wall. The Shufflers wanted this. Shufflers? I asked no pony in particular. Flair was the one who chose to answer, as he often did when it let him flex his knowledge.
It's a derogatory term for ghouls.
My mind went back to the two ghouls I actually knew. Mr. House seemed to be paranoid that the tunnel dwellers blamed him, and the only other ghoul I knew was Lucky, and I wasn't even sure if he was still alive.
There used to be some living in the tunnels before. They weren't really allowed in the city proper before.
We are incredulous. Are you seriously proposing that there are those who blame ghouls for the radiation?
Platinum Haze, who else would use the word incredulous, said.
Desperate ponies will believe stupid things if it gives them someone to blame.
Flair sighed as we started down the staircase.
It's just the way ponies get.
We shall concede to you that point as we can find no inaccuracy in it. However, it will strike us as implausible that ghouls are being blamed. As previously stated, they had no power, and it seemed most did not know any had been living in this area. Unless someone is purposefully spreading rumors of the atrocity being caused by ghouls, it is unlikely such a belief would spring up.
Maybe one guy got paranoid and started spreading it, but that's what the word is down here. Or so I've heard.
We continued our way down the winding staircase further than I'd actually thought the tunnels went. It seemed odd to me to go down so far, but that's what the map told me.
We suppose so, but we are still highly suspicious.
Platinum Haze finished as we reached the bottom. I knew that it was the bottom of the tunnels because apart from the landing and the stairs, everything was unfinished. The walls were incomplete, but the ceiling was still bare stone with jagged rocks jutting out oddly, as if it were a natural cave. The floor was bare stone and packed dirt and nothing else. The whole place smelled stale and stagnant, like nothing had been touched in years. There were no lights anywhere, apart from the landing, and the darkness in the tunnel was way too close, as if it were actually eating what paltry light was left.
Brings back memories,
Flair said quietly beside me. Platinum Haze looked confused at the remark and looked over at me to answer, but the answers were ones I didn't want to give.
Yeah.
I sucked in a deep breath and listened carefully to the silence. We were so far down the radiation hadn't penetrated yet, and I wasn't close to Haze, so my pip-buck wasn't ticking. The only sound was breathing. Our breathing. When I was confident I couldn't hear the sound of wind, I stepped away from the stairs towards the darkness. The amber glow of my pip-buck did little to help penetrate the darkness, but combined with the glow from Platinum Haze's horn and the headlamp on Flair's mask, which I hadn't known he had, we managed to see somewhat in the gloom. At first no pony said anything, but eventually Flair started talking to break the overwhelming tension that filled the air.
So I ended having to mop all the floors in the building as punishment.
Flair ended his story with a barking laugh, and even Platinum Haze gave a diminutive chuckle. I cracked a smile, but I was too nervous to laugh.
We are surprised that someone as mischievous as yourself managed to ascend to the ranks of captain in an organization renowned for their strict policy.
I don't think Platinum Haze meant that as an insult, but I was worried Flair would take it as one.
Well, they did kick me out, you know.
Flair gave another short laugh before continuing.
Actually, I used to be a good soldier. Well, decent. Pretty good for me. I worked hard for my rank, though I mostly did it to keep my mind focused and off other things.
Other things,
I said slowly, turning my gaze to the Pegasus.
So this happened right after that mercenary of yours disappeared.
I remembered the story Flair told before and of an old cold friend of his vanishing while going to find rat scorpions.
Bingo. It was upsetting and the brass was on my back about it. I needed an outlet for my frustrations, so I spent the next several years working my ass off.
Flair sighed a little.
For the good it did. It just put me in charge at Bittersteel, and I wasn't ready. Not for that.
We are confused, Platinum Haze said slowly, her voice echoing through the cavernous hallway. We do not appear to have enough relevant information to understand this conversation.
That's for the best,
Flair said sadly.
It's not a good story, neither of them. You're better off not knowing. See, the truth of why me and Hired here are friends is because we really have no choice. We've been through so much and know so much about each other. We're destined to either be friends or mortal enemies. Since I like living, I decided on the friends option.
Oh, we suppose that is a suitable reason. We have heard some stories about what you have done, and your hypothesis seems acceptable.
I'm a story pony. Ask my cutie mark,
Flair said as he flapped his way over some rubble that blocked the path.
But some stories don't do justice to the truth. I could tell 1,000 ponies what I saw, what we saw in that Celestia Forsaken Mountain, but no pony would truly understand.
Platinum Haze flew over the rubble as well, and I lifted me rather suddenly with her magic, almost giving me a heart attack.
We did not mean to imply we understood exactly, only that the concept seemed plausible.
I know, I just have a flair for the dramatic.
When Platinum Haze put me down and my heart stopped racing, I looked over at Flair.
That explains the name, I suppose.
Pony parents do have a thing for prophetic naming, don't they?
Flair seemed amused at the idea as we continued through the dark.
I've already figured out your silver.
I raised an eyebrow in his direction, giving him permission to continue with whatever silly thing he was going to say.
Your coat is silver, and everywhere you go, it looks like a storm has just passed through. It's a perfect name.
Once again, it wasn't funny enough to coax a laugh out of me, but I did smile.
You, though.
He pointed a wing at Platinum Haze.
I don't know why you're named that.
Oh, we know why. The alicorn smiled. We have named ourselves Platinum Haze.
I guess if I could name myself Hired Gun, she could name herself whatever she wanted.
The reason for naming ourselves that is that we can recall that before Unity the word platinum was present in our name. But we cannot remember the rest, thus Haze.
You can't remember your old name?
Flair asked carefully. He was probably worried about it being a more sensitive matter than Haze was letting on.
There's much about our former life we cannot remember clearly. Our name, not the least of all.
Platinum Haze said in an almost wistful tone.
Oh, we have a problem,
she said as the three of us stopped. She was right about that last part. Before us, the tunnel split in 3 separate ways. What was worse, when I checked my pip-bug map, there was only supposed to be 1 tunnel. Whoever was building the deep tunnels was apparently not following instructions.
Which way?
Flair asked, and it was a really good question, but I didn't really know the answer.
We believe it is this way.
Platinum Haze pointed towards the rightmost tunnel.
We can feel wind, which could indicate that an exit lies this direction. Yeah, sure.
It was as good an answer as any, so we headed down that tunnel. For some reason my shoulder was hurting more than usual, but between Platinum Haze's magic and the fact it had been painfully long since I had a Med-X, it meant nothing. Quickly though I got the feeling we'd made the wrong choice. While it was true I could hear wind as we went further and further down the tunnel, I couldn't actually feel it. Also, the tunnel seemed even more unfinished. I was no tunnel expert, but it seemed like the latest to be built, as the only thing marking it as something other than a naturally made tunnel was the wooden support beams attached to the plain rock walls. We didn't have to travel that far for my suspicions to be confirmed, as we soon reached the end of the tunnel. It wasn't just a bare wall though. At the very end of the tunnel was a giant drill-like machine pointed at the uncut wall. It was actually really impressive looking and the sort of thing I'm sure Serenity would have loved to see.
I'm guessing this is the wrong way.
Flair said, wandering over to the giant drill.
Kind of a waste of time.
But Platinum Haze stood back looking confused.
We are sure there was wind this direction. Certain of it.
I could hear wind too, so it had to be coming from somewhere. Since the route in front of us was just solid block of stone and had now answered, I looked up. This proved one of the smarter things I did that day as I found the answer. Above of the ceiling seemed to be very cracked and worn, and through one of the larger cracks I could see a hint of metal and some light.
I think we're under another floor.
I pointed up. My two companions looked up.
Ah,
Flair said.
That makes sense. It looks unstable up there. They probably shut down tunneling out of concern of a cave-in.
I guess that made sense. Platinum Haze frowned deeply as she stared up at the cracks.
We suppose. We are sorry for the mistake.
There looked to be something bothering her, but I didn't ask. Instead, I walked over to where Flair was to check out the giant drill.
Yup,
Flair chirped.
guess we'll try the next two. So much fun.
His voice dripped in sarcasm.
Let's just rest a minute here,
I said, taking a deep breath.
Rest? Come on, you can't be tired already. If we need to stop to get our bearings, it should be at the crossroads anyway, not here.
Flair said, but didn't actually move to start back down the tunnel.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, I was just stopping to try and think of an excuse to use some Med-X. I was starting to crave the stuff, but I didn't want Haze to know about that. Maybe if I pretended to stub my hoof or something. As I tried to think of a good excuse, I casually leaned onto the back panel of the giant drill, an act which was incredibly stupid. With the sound of a dragon roaring, the machine sparked into life.
What shit?
I stood straight up as the world started to shake. Slowly the drill started to spin, and as it did, tiny rocks rained from the ceiling onto my head.
Hired, make it stop!
Flair said, looking around in panic.
I'm trying!
The panel didn't make any sense. There were so many buttons I didn't even know which one I accidentally pressed. I tried pushing at random, but it didn't seem to help. A giant boulder crashed into the ground behind me.
Just book it!
Flair sped away towards the exit of the tunnel.
Silver, we advise immediate withdrawal for your own safety.
Right, Haze. I turned to run towards her, but that's when everything came crashing down. I heard them before they came, and my eyes shot up. The entire ceiling was falling. I kept running, but I knew it was too late. My natural luck and incredibly tough body wouldn't be able to survive this one. I didn't give up though. I kept moving against the odds. And against the odds, nothing hit me. Not because I was too fast, I wasn't. But instead they bounced off a glimmering purple shield. My gaze shot back over to Haze, whose horn was shimmering purple. I kept running until I reached the end of the shield, and when Haze lowered it, I ran over to her to give her a hug.
Thank you,
I said breathlessly.
You saved my life.
And she was cute too, so I kissed her on the cheek for thanks. My shoulder was burning even more as I hugged her, but I figured that was due to being so close to Haze's horn.
Hired?
Even through the mask I could tell there was something troubled in Flair's voice.
Hired?
I glanced over from Haze to see him staring at something on the floor. Behind me.
Hired? We need to fucking go. Now!
I let go of Haze and turned to see what scared Flair so much. And I saw Wildfire. She was standing on top of a rubble pile that was half rock, half ruins from the tunnels above. And right in front of her was a glowing orb.
Did you forget me?
Wildfire asked as blood seeped from her lips.
No. No.
My eyes went wide as I turned around in panic, only to run into Pinprick, a dagger still jutting out of her neck.
You were supposed to save me,
Pinprick said.
You're dead!
I just had to remember that. I couldn't let them get to me, and I couldn't close my eyes. I remembered the orb. If I closed my eyes, memories would come back. Memories that were impossible to escape. I couldn't go back there. Fuck, how did it end up here? I should have noticed. We buried the orb, but not far enough. I ran through the ghost of Pinprick, her body dissipating in my wake.
What?
Hayes stuttered.
We do not understand. What is this? Why?
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Flair grab onto her neck and turn her around to help her along.
When we say run, fucking run!
We ran. I should have realized. I should have noticed. I should have remembered. I should have seen it. I should have... Fuck! Images flashed past. Vague memories, sounds, images. It was like before. The orb, it made memories come back. Words from my past haunting me. It wasn't as powerful as Simpleheart himself, granting your wishes in dreams. Just memories. But they were enough. I had to keep my eyes open. I couldn't fall into the trap again.
Don't close your eyes!
I yelled over to Hayes.
What? We will not. But why?
She yelled back, though it seemed unnatural coming from her.
It feels right. We feel tired.
No!
Me and Flair shouted in unison.
We do not see the harm.
We turned into the four-way intersection.
Hayes!
I stopped to turn towards her, pressing a hoof against her.
You have to promise me you won't close your eyes. It's dangerous. It's... Hayes?
Shit. She slowed to a stop as my hoof pressed against her, and I could see her eyes drooping.
Hayes! Fuck! Hayes!
I shook her with my forehoofs. It was too late. She stood stark still with her eyes completely closed, the spell of the orb wrapped around her, holding her. Like others we saw in the tunnel so long ago, she could be stuck in that memory for as long as she lived. I had to stop that from happening. I had to.
She's gone, isn't she?
Flair said, looking over at Hayes. But something caught his eye and he turned slightly to face it.
Go away!
I heard him hiss, but I pretended not to notice.
She's gone.
I grit my teeth in annoyance. There had to be something.
Help me with her. I need to get her lying down.
Sleeping standing up really wasn't that hard, especially with the spell helping her, so I had to press against the backs of her legs to get them to fold. With Flair's help, we were able to lower her to the ground.
What are you planning?
Flair asked me as I stared down at the poor alicorn.
Do you think it works the same as Simpleheart?
I didn't look over at Flair.
The magic is similar, but different. I could enter your dreams in the mountain. Do you think that was on purpose?
Well...
Flair said.
I told you how I'd planned to be a psychologist a long time ago, right? When I was a colt.
That sounded vaguely familiar.
Well, I got the idea in my head by reading a novel about a doctor who used a spell to make ponies relive traumatic events. And then he'd go into the dream to watch them and use what he saw to help them recover. You said Simpleheart was a psychologist before you went all crazy, right?
I nodded again.
Maybe it's the same sort of idea.
So?
So if it worked in the mountain, it might work here. And what other choice do we have?
None. None whatsoever.
I'll watch over the two of you. I can handle the orb. I've done it before. Just please don't be too long.
Yeah.
I lowered my head, pressing my forehead against Platinum Hazes.
I promise.
The world swirled around me.
Is Celestia a goddess?
The question was scrawled in bright red over the entrance of a burning building, a single-story shack. half pre-war, half scrap, sitting alone in an arid brown field. I hesitated to enter through the fire, but when I approached, I found that the fire gave no heat, and my hoof passed through the flame with nothing but the warm sensation of direct sunlight. I looked up at the message and felt like it was asking me directly.
Yes,
I answered the question, though no pony was around to hear me. It seemed important. The door opened with an echoing creak. I stuck my head inside to look around. It seemed to be larger on the inside. There was a single bed in the room, but instead of a wooden type like you might see in Mereford, it was a stable bed. Only, unlike the ones I've seen, brand new. It was the only thing of stable make in the room. There was a dining room table and a fridge, but they both looked like they actually belonged in the wasteland. Importantly, the inside of the house was not on fire.
Some memory,
I mumbled to myself, stepping inside the building to take a closer look. There didn't seem to be another exit to the house, but Thiese wasn't in it. She had to be somewhere. It was her dream after all. Something flickered in the corner of my eyes, and when I turned, I saw a staircase. Though I was certain it had not been there previously, I walked up to it. The stairs led nowhere, just ending abruptly at the ceiling. They were cracked and bowed, definitely not able to hold my weight, even if they had led somewhere. The oddest thing about the staircase was, the longer I stared at them, the more blurry they got, until the stairs vanished altogether as if they were never there. Which was the most likely option, as I didn't actually go anywhere. So the answers wouldn't be found up the non-existent stairs. So I moved over to the bed to try and figure out why it didn't fit. Maybe this house, which I assumed to be Platinum Haze's old house before that Unity thing, was near a stable and they stole a bed from it? It was the only answer I could think of when I studied the bed. Out of curiosity, I lifted the covers to see anything underneath. Oh, there's a pony-sized bloodstain, and not an old one either. It's bright red, rust-smelling, and wet. If this was a memory, it wasn't like the ones the orb brought me to last time. Those were happy memories, and this... The thought occurred to me that this might actually constitute a happy memory to Thiese, and that was more unnerving still. With nothing left to study about the bed, I turned my way towards the table. Perhaps it had some clue to where Thiese was. It didn't. Not really, but it had other clues. Lying on the table was pieces of paper that looked like it was ripped out of a book and repurposed as a canvas for an artistic kid. Drawn over faded words with crayon with a rather impressive picture, especially since it was clear it was a child's drawing, of 3 ponies. One was an older mare, one a colt, and the third a filly. Their shapes were the only consistent things about the images, as the colors of the ponies changed every time I blinked. The only thing that was static was the silvery color of the filly's mane.
This is pointless,
I said, to dispel the unnerving fear that was gripping me.
Pointless!
I pushed the picture away from me and closed my eyes, trying to concentrate. Thiese had to be in this mess somewhere, and I had to find her if I wanted to get out. I needed to rescue her from her dreams, but more and more it seemed I needed to rescue myself as well. When I opened my eyes, the answer lay before me. A door. This wasn't the same door as before though. The first door was a rickety thing made of sheet metal, and this one was a thick oaken door with a window at head height. When I lowered my head to look through the window, all I saw was my reflection. Groaning in annoyance, I looked around the door and saw words above it, in haunting red.
If so, why were you taken?
Taken? From what? To where? I reached out and turned the knob of the door. There was only one way to find out. I looked over my shoulder to make sure there wasn't anything else around, but the room had been engulfed in flame.
Forward then!
The door opened and I fell through. Fell is an appropriate word because as soon as I opened the door, I dropped at least a meter through the air, landing on my rump in the middle of a caravan. At least it had all the makings of a caravan. There were wagons filled with what looked to be goods, and harnesses hooked up to the wagons for ponies or Brahmin to pull. But there were no ponies, just emptiness and silence. The wagons looked to be as good a place as any for Thiese to be hiding in. A memory, so I walked over to the first one and climbed up to peek my head inside. There was, for the first time so far in the stream, nothing to note. Stacks of bottled water, bags of canned food, a few empty Sparkle Cola bottles and not much else. It was a nice change from whatever was going on at that house. After being confident that there was no Thiese in that wagon, I moved up to check the second of 3. As I peeked into the interior of the cart, something caught in my throat. It was full of chains, just filled completely up with all assortments of chains. Some long and thick, others short and thin. More chains than I'd ever seen in my life. I backed off the second cart and felt my back hoof clank against something. Looking down at the ground, I saw more chains, but these were different. There were 2 rows of chains running beside each other down the length of the caravan. Interspersed through the chains were small shackles in groups of 4. Nervously, I walked over to the shackles and put my hoof over one shackle. Now, I was big even for an adult, but seeing how much my hoof dwarfed the shackle confirmed the only ponies they would have fit were foals. "Fuck," I said under my breath. I was nervous. Nervous enough to whisper even though nothing was nearby. It felt like something was watching me though, and that it was going to make its presence known any second. Still, there was one last wagon to check, and I had to. I don't know why I had to, but I did. Creeping my way over there, I slowly and carefully peered into the final cart. "If so, why were you beaten and broken?" Red words looked up at me, mocking me. I hated the words. I tried to slam my cybernetic hoof through them, but it only bounced off. With a quiet growl, I backed away from the cart and ignored the ever-growing row of chains on the ground. I still had no answers, and no Thiese. There was only one thing I could think of to do, and that was to follow the rows of chains. They seemed to extend now far past the frozen caravan into the distance. I gritted my teeth and started walking beside the row of chains. As I walked, I could hear voices, whispers. There were giggles, sobs, and cries for help all mixed together into a cacophony of sound at the edges of my perception. It didn't get louder as I walked, but it did get noisier. More voices joined the mix, more sounds. Most were foals, but not all. And the further I walked, more adult voices joined the nearly silent din. Until I hit the end, rather suddenly. The chains kept going to the horizon, but I was forced to stop at a cliff face. There was a city below the cliff, grand and stretching, but it wasn't always the same. It changed, twisting and morphing. At first it seemed like a huge seaside city with a giant pony statue out resting in a harbor. Then it appeared to be an island city of smoke and grime, with pink balloons floating about looking almost like pony heads. It slowly transformed into what was almost unmistakably eye glow, complete with glowing crater. Then, finally, it turned to a ruined city. Skyscrapers were topped over, resting on others precariously, and the rooftops were all linked up with hastily made bridges. Below the bridges, I could see, was water. This city was flooded nearly completely, and it was unlike anything I'd seen before. It stayed like that, the flooded city, until I looked away from it. I really hoped I didn't have to search through that to find Thiese. My eyes gazed down, looking perhaps for some path off the cliff into the city, but what I saw was a door. It was hanging perpendicular to the cliff face so that when I looked down, It was staring back up at me.
You've got to be kidding me.
And just like any time any pony ever said that sentence, the door was not kidding.
Fuck.
So I jumped. To tell the truth, I hadn't actually expected to fall. And I definitely hadn't expected to be suddenly plummeted face first towards the door. If it were a real door, it would have shattered under my girth. Instead, it just shook and opened slowly. I landed on my hoofs on the other side of the door. After calming my nerves with a few quick breaths, I looked up to gather my bearing. Just my luck. I was staring straight at a bullet. I jumped back and swung at it, knocking the bullet away. It spun around through the air before stopping once more in mid-air, still pointing at me. Right, more dream trickery. I just had to keep my head about me. Keep calm, deep breath, figure this out. There were many more bullets, and each and every one pointed directly at me. Ignoring them, and it was hard, I saw I was in some kind of cavernous building. The floor was mostly clear of debris, and the regular spaced support pillars were still in good condition. Something bright and yellow caught my eye from behind one of the pillars. I attempted to walk over there, but the wall of lead facing me was blocking my way. It was silly, but the idea of walking into bullets even though they weren't moving, and all this way was just a dream, still unnerved me. There was no time to be afraid though, so I gritted my teeth and closed my eyes. I could feel each individual bullet press against me, but the feeling didn't last. When I opened my eyes, I saw that each bullet, once I pushed past it, bounced off my skin and spun away, then turned to face me again. It was odd, but harmless, at least for now, so I kept walking, and soon got used to them bouncing away from me. When I reached the pillar with a flash, I saw what I expected to see. It was a gun, mid-muzzle flash. I would say what gun or even what type, but it changed and shifted, and I couldn't even begin to keep track. There was a floating set of barding close to the gun, but there was no pony inside it. The barding shifted too, but not nearly as fast, and seemed to linger on spiky, blood-stained armor. I looked around the room, and suddenly more sets of floating armor and guns appeared. Enough that I could get a sense of the conflict that happened here. The armor that I was staring at continued to shift, and as it did, every single piece of armor on that side changed with it, while the other side of the ghostly conflict didn't shift armor. It was always the same. I walked over to the nearest set of ghostly armor that didn't change, and as bullets bounced off me, I began to see what made that side different. Along with the shifting guns and static armor, the ghostly form also had a collar on that looked like it was rigged with wires. It didn't take a genius to figure out what those collars were.
Fight or die,
I said to myself, imagining the orders they must have been given. I turned to walk away from the collared ghost, but when I did, I didn't hit anything. Where were the bullets? My eyes shot around the room to see they had all turned to point at something else. Something on a nearby slate grey wall. Another door. This time it was a sliding metallic door that seemed to be trying harder to be fancier technology than it was. As I walked close, a set of words written in red above it appeared to me. If so, she has forgotten you, but I have not. On the other side, I was standing on the edge of a giant crater that reminded me of one on the outskirts of Thiese, though not nearly as large. Across a gaping hole was a large crumbling building that was half swallowed by the giant sinkhole. Even with it half destroyed, it looked like something resembling a fortress. I tried to take a step towards the building, but suddenly the world twisted and turned and I ended up standing right in front of the equally impressive entrance. Etched above the entrance were the words, Mary Pony, Ministry of Arcane Science Hub. As I read the name of the building, smaller red words wrote themselves before my eyes. I have seen your wounds, and I have wept. The doors opened by themselves, revealing a grand hallway that looked pristine. Not preserved like the mountain facility, but brand new. almost shining. I hadn't seen anything like it in my life, so I eagerly stepped inside the building. As I did, the door slammed shut behind me. The cleanliness faded and turned into cracks and rubble. Without so much as a bright flash to signal their coming, the hallway was filled with alicorns. There must have been at least 100 in the long hallway, each standing side by side with their wings outstretched, lining both sides of the hallway. Green, blue, purple. They went in order. The greens facing greens across the fall. The blues, and so on. I had never seen so many in my life, and the staggering number made me feel small and frail. I could only imagine how a regular pony would have felt. Slowly and carefully, so as not to startle them, I made my way towards the end of the hall.
You are not alone. I can end your pain.
One of the blues boomed at me, nearly making me jump out of my skin.
Right. Good to know.
I kept to walking, my hoofsteps echoing down the hallways, which I was sure were longer than the building was.
I can set you free.
Another spoke at me, a blue once again. I tried to ignore it, but a third blue spoke at me, then a fourth, until all I could hear was their voices booming.
I can give you life. I can bring you hope. I can break your chains. I can heal your wounds. Celestia does not care for you, not like I do. Join us and be happy. At last, I can set you free.
The last word, free, hung in the air for longer than it had any right to as I reached the end. The last door, and I was almost certain it was the last, was the same as the first. Above it were the words written in red. Unity is your salvation. I opened the door and walked out onto a catwalk. The room looked like it had once been some sort of factory, but of what I couldn't even begin to guess. 2/3 of the ceiling had collapsed, revealing parts of the complex above, and most of the catwalks were destroyed, except for the portion I was standing on. The floor below me was... well, I'm sure there was a floor there at some point, but all I could see was a thick layer of sludge covered with dust and debris. I swear I saw something swimming in it. There were 5 vats of something in the room, but 3 were destroyed. Luckily for me, the catwalk I was on ended right above one. I didn't want to know what happened here, but I had to know. I walked towards the end of the catwalk, nervousness rising in my guts. When I reached the end, I closed my eyes and pointed my head down at the vat, so that when I opened them I would be forced to see whatever it was. My eyes opened to the sight of a strange green and purple liquid. It was odd, but not... wait, there was something else. Slowly the liquid swirled and swirled until the pony's face was staring up at me. It mouthed words at me, but I didn't know what, and I wasn't about to stay to ask it. I stood up and moved to turn, but something blocked me.
This was a good memory.
Platinum Haze was beside me, and if she hadn't talked, I would have mistaken her for another vision.
But it is faded, polluted by other memories. So many memories, so many voices, and I can still hear them.
I. She said I, not we.
Sometimes I cannot remember what happened to me, and what happened to my sisters. Or perhaps my sisters are me.
This was a good dream?
I asked quietly, still not sure if she knew I was there or just talking to herself. For a good minute I was still not sure, as the blue alicorn stared into the vat with intense yellow eyes.
Yes, my first one.
She did not stop staring at the vat.
Those things, visions, did those actually happen, or what the fuck?
Swearing was probably not the best thing to do at that moment, but damn it, I was confused.
Yes. No.
She paused, her eyes not even glancing over at me.
They are a plea of the memory. Things, memories, places. She showed them to me and my sisters to open our eyes, to see the blessing she was about to bestow.
Blessing?
I glanced down at the vat, but grimaced and had to turn away.
You call that a blessing?
Mother gave us purpose. She gave me a reason to continue my existence, to continue living. She gave me happiness and family. She gave us immortality and the power never to be hurt again. With her, with unity, we were never alone.
She stomped her hoof so hard I swear it cracked the metal.
Then the destroyer came and took it away.
She turned to me, her eyes fierce.
What right has a mortal to judge a goddess? What right did she have to take away our family? She took my home. She took everything, and they call her a hero, Lightbringer. She tossed us into a sea, confused and afraid, and she cared not.
Her eyes lowered and she looked to be on the brink of tears.
I can still see the flames of green. I can hear my sisters scream. So much pointless death. And for what and who? Do you know what my mother's last words were?
I shook my head, unable to form words. I'd never seen her so angry.
Fly, my children. Save yourselves.
She turned her head away from me back to the vat.
They call her a monster, but she was not. She was a mother, and everything she did for us. And she did so much for us. She made a deal with the destroyer, knowing she could not be trusted. She risked herself and sacrificed herself in an attempt to save our species. Mother wanted to make stallions, so we could reproduce, so we could have a larger family. For us, for that crime, she was murdered. So many of my sisters murdered. Some of my sisters have forgiven her, the destroyer, but I shall not.
I'm sorry.
Part of me wanted to ask more about this goddess, to see what she truly was, because the last pony I met claiming to be a god was less than forthright. But it didn't matter. Not then. The truth could wait.
You need not be. You did nothing, and the past is past. I cannot fight the past, so I must live for the future. Mother is dead. She cannot come back, but her children live on, and I will do proud by her.
She looked back over at me, her eyes wet with budding tears.
I knew it was a dream. From the start. It was wrong. Too many memories. Too much. I am glad you came for me.
Not surprised?
Should we be?
I opened my mouth to say something, but she continued on a tangent.
If nothing else, this vision has reminded me of something that once was. Before Unity, I had a cutie mark.
I'd assumed that.
2 chains crossed in an X.
Oh,
I said quietly, my mind racing, trying to think of something positive that could represent.
I think.
She lowered her head, staring deep into the vault. I caught a sight of a tear dripping down from her eye and dropping into the vat below.
It's time to go home.
She wrapped a wing around me, turned and fell into the vat, pulling me along with her. I screamed. We hit the face in the center of the vat. I think it was smiling. There was a splash, but I didn't get wet. The sound of whispering welcomed my return back to the world of the living. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Wildfire standing in front of me, tears in her eyes.
We've been over this,
I said to the ghostly form.
What?
Came a mutter from one side. I turned my head to see Flare staring at me.
Oh, phew, you're awake. I thought I was hearing things. More things. How'd it go, is she?
We are fine,
Platinum Haze said, cutting Flare off. Hearing her speak seemed to calm the stallion down.
We are sorry about that.
I stood up first and offered a hoof to help the alicorn up. She grabbed onto my outstretched leg and used it to hoist herself back up to all fours.
Thank you.
Right, so we're all good.
He paused.
Should I even ask what happened?
Best not.
I said, checking my Pip-Bug's radiation detector to distract myself from the voices in the air.
Not now, anyway. We need to go.
We must agree. This place is a danger. This magic, it is a terrible blight and a lie. It begs us to remember the past, live with it, but nothing comes from reliving the past, even the good parts.
Platinum Haze sounded more like she was trying to convince herself more than us.
Right, well, I can't argue there, but where are we going? We still don't know the right path. Maybe we should just head back.
Flair offered as a solution.
I think...
I flipped to the map on my Pip-Bug, and the answer came to me. It was stupid of me not to realize it sooner. There may have been 3 paths to choose from, but the map only had 1. So all we had to do was choose a path that went the same direction as my map said we were supposed to go. Just because there were more tunnels than my map said, didn't mean the path we had to choose changed. As I berated myself internally, I pointed to the leftmost tunnel.
This way!
I started walking down it, but neither of my comrades went to follow me.
Trust me.
Platinum Haze and Flair looked over at each other and then, in silent agreement, started to follow. We walked as fast as we could without breaking into a full gallop. As we moved down the tunnel, we found it getting more and more complete and like the tunnels in the upper levels. The walls became more flat and uniform. The ceiling was also smoothed down and lights were installed, letting out of the impressive darkness. Most importantly of all, the more we walked, the fainter the whispers of the orb became, until they had vanished altogether. The tunnel was excessively long, taking us a better part of an hour to get through it, and was almost annoyingly twisty, which made for a very long, very quiet walk, not counting the whispers. Though even after we left the range of the orb's power, no pony really spoke for a while. I eventually broke the silence.
I need to find a way to bring that orb back.
Platinum Haze said nothing, but looked down at me in confusion. But Flair responded,
Wait, you mean that deal with Simple Art? Wasn't that whole thing, like, abandoned? You know, when he tried to kill us?
I know,
I said softly.
But that complex might be useful later, if I could get on his good side.
He doesn't have a good side.
Flair scoffed at the very idea.
He has a crazy side and a kind of depressing side.
We are confused once more,
Platinum Haze said softly.
Who is this Simple Heart, and what connection does he possess to that thing?
Simple Heart is a self-proclaimed god,
Flair stated, eliciting a confused and slightly upset look from Haze.
Of the complex in the mountain near Timber. Some sort of science experiment gone wrong. Now he's crazy and mindfucks any pony who enters. The way he spoke of it seemed like before the war they somehow siphoned off some of his power and put them in orbs, and Hired agreed to get them back.
We must agree with Hired then. It may help him to have such an object back. Perhaps it would calm his mind.
Easy for you to say.
Flair shook his head.
But this isn't ordinary crazy. Besides, even if we wanted to, there's no way any pony is carrying that orb anywhere and staying sane.
Platinum Haze seemed to think about this and responded in turn.
We may be able to come up with a spell to shunt out its powers. We will think on this.
I hoped Haze would come up with something, because I could think of a lot of things to do with that facility if I could gain Simple Heart's trust. Sure, I would still need a way to kick the Steel Rangers out, but if I could, there was just so much technology stored there. And building materials. And if push came to shove and the radiation didn't go away quick enough, maybe the residents of the Thiese tunnels could move into it. It had the infrastructure. That was only if Platinum Haze was able to help, and if Simple Heart appreciated it. Mostly it hinged on him becoming less crazy with the orb. so that was unlikely, but I'd liked to have some options for once. I did not have time to think on the subject for long, because very soon the hallway ended. At the end of the hallway was not a staircase, like my map suggested, so it really needed an update, but a door and a button beside it. It was fairly clear what the door was supposed to be, so I pressed the button and waited.
"It seems to still be operational," Platinum Haze said. "We wonder if it has seen maintenance, or if it is impressively resistant to the passage of time."
That was a good question. My theory was proven right, as the elevator in the facility was also still working, even though there was no way any pony went there to repair it, and they were both made, or at least paid for, by Walkirk.
200 years isn't that long,
Flair said dryly. The elevator dinged when it reached the bottom and opened up. It was much smaller than any other elevator I had seen, and the three of us were squashed together. There were only 2 buttons on the inside though, so I pressed the higher one.
This is uncomfortable.
"Yes."
Platinum Haze was hunched over awkwardly so our horn didn't go through the ceiling.
"We summarized this elevator was designed for a singular pony."
Hopefully we are not over the weight limit.
Flair said, and when I checked the weight limit it occurred to me we actually were. This did not at all help with my previous, completely reasonable, fear of being dragged up a shaft in a rickety metal box. I held my breath the entire ride up, and I nearly ran out of the box when the doors opened. Before I could even look around, a voice spoke over a speaker.
Welcome back, Mr. Walkirk. It has been 73,777 days, 21 hours, 33 minutes and 4 seconds since your last visit.
Platinum Haze closed her eyes when the numbers were recited before adding,
"That is about 5 days before the end of the Great War."
Wait, what?
How did you...
Platinum Haze turned her head to me, blinking in confusion.
"Math. In your head. Never mind."
Flair chuckled and walked past, getting an eyeful of the room.
Maybe Mr. House was right.
That reminded me, we were finally there. I took stock of the room. Well, it was more like a hallway. It was a sleek grey hallway that we were at the end of. Behind us, there were 2 elevators. One of the one we used to get here, the other presumably that led up to the clips and clops. On the ceiling, besides the lights, there were not-so-secret video cameras and speakers. At the far end of the hallway was a door. No doubt where we needed to go. There was also... oh, shit.
Are those Ponytrons?
Flair asked as 2 robots rolled up to us.
Do not move,
The 2 equine-shaped robots said in unison, guns unfolding out of their backs.
Any action will be seen as hostile.
Crack, crack. Bolts of lightning flew from Platinum Haze's horn in quick succession, and faster than I could blink, the Ponytrons were nothing more than smoking wrecks.
I thought you were a pacifist.
Flair said, having at some point jumped into the air out of shock.
"What?"
Platinum Haze stepped forward to kick the scrap of the Ponytrons out of the way.
"We are indeed secure in our pacifist beliefs, but these are autonomous machines, and destroying them is not a violation. If they had some measure of AI or the capacity to feel pain, our beliefs would be altered, but they do not, so it is a harmless act."
Sounds good to me,
I said, quickly following after the alicorn.
Where did you even learn that spell?
Unity.
And that was all the answer I needed.
Sure.
Flair scoffed, fluttering after us.
Be all cryptic and stuff. Hey, Hired, aren't you forgetting that crown thing?
Oh, right. I dug into my saddlebag and pulled out the tiara. I turned it around to study the device to see if it had any, on switch, but it didn't seem to. The only thing that it had was that black opal. Well, I had to put it on eventually. I did it slowly, carefully. It was super magical and expensive, and I was leery of memory magic for so many reasons.
Did anything happen?
Flair asked when it was secure on my head. I waited. Nothing. I tried tapping at it with my hoof. Nothing.
I'm not sure.
Mr. House didn't really give me any instructions. It should have done like something, right? Or I should have felt something. It was just normal, except for making me look gaudy.
Well, he should have given me better instructions.
We have no extensive knowledge of the recollector device, so we are unable to assist in this manner,
Platinum Haze said as we continued down to the door at the end of the hall. I was surprised she even knew what the thing was, but I shouldn't have been. Then came the moment of truth. It was clear at that point that there was something down there, even if we didn't know what. So all we had to do was open the door to see if Mr. House was right, or if we had all just wasted our time. I cracked the door, and when I was sure it wasn't about to explode or anything, I opened it all the way. Inside was a computer. No, the computer. It was so large it filled up 3 of the 4 walls, so that when I walked in, I was surrounded on all sides. This put to shame every computer I'd seen in my life. I remembered one of the documents I found detailing computer technology stolen from Equestria, but I didn't expect this.
Whoa,
I said breathlessly. It took me a minute to remember what I was supposed to be doing. My eyes scanned the whole room slowly so that when Mr. House saw the memory, he'd see it all. If I couldn't find a port, I'd look at it in greater detail, but until then, a glance would do.
The old cook was right.
Flair walked in behind me.
Color me impressed.
This looks like something we have seen before, but we cannot recall.
Platinum Haze spoke her mind out loud.
if you remember, tell me.
Right, so I needed to find a port. Or whatever it was called. Something to hook my pip-bug to. If it was going to be any place, it was probably going to be on what looked like access panels below the giant screen on the far wall across from the entrance. I walked over to study the row of buttons and stuff. It was all really confusing and way out of my league. I really did wish I'd brought Serenity then, because it was probably right up her alley. But I hadn't, so I had to do it myself. Somehow. It would have helped if I could have found a damn access port though.
Do you like it?
I jumped back as the voice boomed. My head shot up and my eyes scanned looking for whatever just did that.
What the hell?
Flair asked loudly, just as confused as I was.
It is called the Crusader mainframe.
The voice paused before continuing.
It was supposed to be anyway, but my spies were unable to steal complete design documents, so we had to improvise. It is as close as you'll find south of Equestria, though.
Who are you?
I thought it was someone from the Clips and Clops toying with us over the speaker system. They'd seen us with the cameras, and now were letting us know how screwed we were. I was wrong. The giant monitor flicked on. On it was a moving image of a slightly overweight brown stallion. He was balding slightly and his hair was a deep grey. It took me a few seconds, but then I realized I had seen that pony before.
I am the ruler of dice,
the stallion on the screen said with a knowing smile.
I am Walkirk. Level up, skill note, survival 75, new perk, rat resistance. Your natural resistance to radiation and its effect is now 25% better than a normal pony of your same health and size, if such a pony existed.
We here at Pony&Wolf Productions thank these amazing patrons of ours for their monthly support, without which all of this would not be possible. We sincerely appreciate it, and every dollar helps, is needed, and will be used to keep us going to produce audiobooks for your continued enjoyment. It is, now more than ever, important that you support your favorite creators if possible, due to YouTube changing in a way that is not very friendly to content creators. Especially small content creators, like us. In recent months, the names you see on screen have enabled Midnight and Visual Pony to keep going and only having to sell off part of their belongings to not end up on the street. As an incentive for everyone, Visual Pony has broken a vow and has promised to read and record FalloutEquestria, Murky number 7, should the monthly support reach $1,500. To be clear, this is the absolute minimum amount needed to keep the apartment and all bills paid without starving, while a production of this size is ongoing. The estimated time for this production would be 3 to 4 years, but people already said that Project Horizons was impossible to do, right? And now look who did it, so with Pony and Wolf, you know we can finish the job. For further information on how to support us, please have a look at the description of this video, as there are also other ways, like our merch store. Sincerely and forever yours, your Pony and Wolf team.